take a deep breath, take the higher road. That's what they always say, as if they know the way. They won't take it from me. But don't ever doubt yourself, 'cause life ain't just a dream. You make your own, so kick and scream. The people will act with a never-ending force. You never had the chance, so what you waiting for? The day has come, my friend, 'cause this is war. It's time and this is war.
Today we are going to delve into the crucial aspects of safety and ethical concerns surrounding the field of self-amplifying mRNA vaccines. As we stand on the brink of this new era in immunization technology, it is imperative that we thoroughly explore and understand the implications of these advanced medicinal products. First and foremost, we must consider the safety concerns. Self-amplifying mRNA vaccines, by design, utilize a replication mechanism that amplifies the mRNA sequence within the body. This novel approach raises questions about the control of mRNA replication rates and the potential for unforeseen immunological responses. How does our body react to this continuous production of antigens? Could there be a risk of excessive immune activation leading to adverse effects? These are not just theoretical concerns, but pressing questions that need conclusive answers through rigorous clinical trials. Moving on to the ethical considerations, the accelerated development and deployment of these vaccines pose significant challenges. In the rush to combat global health crises, how do we ensure that these vaccines are tested thoroughly and ethically? The urgency to distribute new vaccines has seemingly overshadowed the need for comprehensive data transparency and informed consent, which are cornerstone principles in medical ethics. Moreover, the use of genetic material in vaccines introduces complex consent issues, particularly around genetic privacy. What safeguards are in place to protect individuals' genetic data? And what ethical considerations are prioritized during the vaccine development process? As we proceed with today's discussions, we need to keep these concerns at the forefront of our minds. As healthcare professionals, it is our duty and our moral obligation to scrutinize, to question, and to understand deeply not just the scientific foundations, but also the ethical frameworks that guide the development and use of self-amplifying mRNA vaccines. Although we understand the importance of advancements in medical technology, we must stay true to our commitment to safety and ethics to pave the way for responsible advancements. You're listening to Nurses Out Loud on America Out Loud Talk Radio. I'm your host, Nurse Kimberly Overton. I also have with me today Nurse Ashley Grogg and Nurse Nicole. And before we get started today, I do want to encourage our listeners, if you have questions or comments, or perhaps you want to share your own experiences with what you're seeing on the front lines of healthcare, you can now submit those to any of the hosts by emailing them directly to nurses@americaoutloud.com. We would love to hear from you. We encourage all of you to engage in the battle and find your voice in this fight. But until you are able to do that, we will continue to be that voice for you. Today, we are welcoming a very special guest who can help us to navigate the complexities of this critical issue. Nicolas Hulscher is an epidemiologist and a McCullough Foundation Fellow. He graduated from the University of Michigan School of Public Health, where he earned a Master of Public Health degree. Nicolas, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me on your show.
Absolutely. And thank you, Ashley and Nurse Nicole, for joining. I'm sure we are going to have quite the conversation today.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited about this topic. It's a good one.
It is a very good topic. So to start off, if you would just explain to our listeners what self-amplifying mRNA vaccines are exactly and how they differ from traditional mRNA vaccines.
Yeah, so the self-replicating messenger RNA vaccines, they can also be called replicon vaccines. That's just another word for self-amplifying. But what these do is they have a replicase gene attached to the product, which which they derive from a virus. And so how they differ is the replicon vaccines just self-replicate in the body because of this replicase added onto it. And so it's just gonna replicate basically for seemingly an unlimited period of time. And the conventional ones, they just go in for a finite dose. They don't replicate, and so they should, at least we now know they don't clear out of the body, even the conventional ones, very easily. But yeah, so these self-replicating ones represent massive concerns, and one thing that's very important is in the clinical trials for these injections, for the Actaris Therapeutics one, the one they rolled out in Japan recently, it has a 90% adverse event rate in trials 1 through 3, and 70% of them were systemic reactions, so fever, body aches, things like that. And about 15% of the adverse reactions actually required medical attention. And this was all in the trial. So these products are clearly, no safe product should elicit that high proportion of adverse reactions.
And can you talk a little bit about how these vaccines come to market? What is that process? Is it a very rigorous process that brings these vaccines to market? It's a little bit different than with a drug, because vaccines are considered biologics. So my understanding is that it is not as difficult to bring a vaccine to market as it is a drug. Is that correct?
Right. That's correct. The vaccines, they don't have to do any. So when they roll out a booster, especially like a next iteration of any of the vaccines, they don't have to do any clinical testing because it's labeled as a vaccine. Now, for a drug, obviously they can't just come up with a new drug and then don't have to do any testing and then just put it on the market. But yeah, so they don't have to do this testing. Even when they originally rolled out the original vaccines, they didn't do much testing, just a few months. So yeah, with these vaccines, for some reason, our regulatory agencies are very corrupt that they let this happen. But yeah, it's not good, and we need a complete overhaul of the FDA and those who are approving these products, so we can prevent this from happening in the future.
Can I ask a question real quick?
Yeah, of course.
Two things. Okay, so for normal people, maybe not researching and reading all of this stuff. So the mRNA is what COVID vaccines were used, and they say that is supposedly supposed to have a very short lifespan. It's supposed to be very fragile, goes into the cell, teaches the cell how to make the spike protein in the COVID case, and then it dies. But these self-replicating ones go in there. Do they just replicate on their own, or does it teach your body how to replicate the mRNA? Do you know that?
Yeah, well, from what I understand, it gets into the cell, and from it interacts with so it basically is a virus, if you think of it that way, because it contains replicase, which is what's used in many viruses to hijack your cellular machinery to replicate. So yeah, it does need to get into your cell and interact with I don't remember exactly which component in the cell, but it needs to interact. And they say, according to these manufacturers, they say that it cannot replicate outside of the cell. It needs to have those components to replicate. So that's how they try and explain away the shedding concerns regarding this. But yeah, so apparently it does need to interact with a cell, be in a cell to replicate. But according to the manufacturers, it can't do it outside of the cell.
So my next question with that, and I'm sorry, Kim, I'm kind of like jumping in here, but I've got like so many questions about this topic. I've been trying to read and research, and I found some information from like back in 2005 where they're working on DNA, particle mediated DNA vaccines. And I kind of feel like this is maybe leading. Do you feel like this is one of those steps to get to that end game? And how much do we have to worry about it? And again, I've read that it's not supposed to go into the nucleus, so it shouldn't, code your cells, so to speak. But what do you think about that? Is that something we have to worry about with these self-amplifying? Is it going to be a greater risk for something like that to be encoded, or is that yet to be seen?
Yeah, I think that's yet to be seen because they're so new and there's been so little testing. But I mean, if we looked at the conventional ones, those were shown to reverse transcribe in a liver cell line in a study like a few years ago. And there's been no further testing since then, which there should have been. So we still don't even know if these conventional mRNA shots reverse transcribe. So we know absolutely nothing about the self-replicating versions, what they're going to do. But I could guess that the chance may increase because they're just going to keep replicating over and over again with greater chance to reverse transcribe.
Is so disturbing to me. And even with the regular COVID vaccines, there were so many safety concerns. Like you said, there was very little testing that had come out with these safety. And the reason I ended up leaving my job as a nurse at that time, I ended up resigning from my position because they were wanting me to recommend vaccines for everyone, including children. And they were wanting me to not only to recommend them and encourage them, but they were wanting me to tout them as safe and effective, period. I was working as a telephone triage nurse at the time, and they actually had a scripted answer for us. If somebody were to call in and say, is this COVID vaccine safe for my child? Should I get it? My answer to them was supposed to be yes, period. It is safe and effective, period, which I refused, because we would have absolutely no way of knowing that. We did not have any safety data. So I thought it would be really interesting to go in here just right now as we're having this conversation and ask if we're ask the internet, is self-replicating, amplifying mRNA vaccines, are they safe? And here's the answer that we get. And just tell me if you agree with this answer. It says, yes, this involves understanding the rigorous protocols and extensive research that underpin the development of any new vaccine. Like all vaccines, self-amplifying mRNA vaccines undergo a meticulous and thorough development process, which includes multiple phases of clinical trials. These phases are designed to test everything from basic safety and efficacy to the finer details of dosing and potential side effects. I just want to laugh as I'm reading this because it is just so ridiculous. Like literally none of this happens. Am I correct that none of this happens? None of these things that they're talking about to this.
You're correct. Yeah, you're correct. Now I guess they did do the trials, but it didn't, in my opinion, didn't show they were safe at all. It showed they were very, very dangerous. I don't know how the authors can conclude that 90% of people experiencing adverse events is safe. I just don't see how they can come to that conclusion.
Right. And even with the COVID vaccine, the short-term data was alarming. And this was back I started Nurse Freedom Network in July of 2021. And I think that the vaccines might have been 6 months at that time, 6 months or so. So yeah, I mean, and the short-term data there was very, very alarming, yet they were continuing with their mantra of safe and effective, safe and effective. Another thing I find really interesting when I'm at work and we have these on our computers, we have that educational monograph that we can go to look at side effects of different medications. Every medication has a laundry list of side effects. When you go to vaccines, you might have a sore arm, red arm, you might have a fever. That's it. What makes vaccines different from every other drug on the market?
Well, vaccines make a lot of money for big pharmaceutical companies. I think that's the primary reason behind that. And they've gotten away with it for so long that they just continue to do it, and it needs to be addressed. It really does.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd love to, maybe hear more from Nurse Nicole and Nurse Ashley, because we have to address the blind and implicit trust that so many have had in the vaccine industry for so many years. And I think that if there's a silver lining to COVID, it is that so many have kind of woken up. I was pro-vaccine my entire life, my entire nursing career. And, the education we receive on vaccines, safe, effective, and necessary, nothing more than that. So I think it was very eye-opening for a lot of us, for nurses and for the general public. So I'm just curious to know your thoughts about, and Ashley and Nicole too. There are still people out there getting their 7th, 8th, and 9th booster. How do we reach these people?
Well, I think that once you've taken like 4, 5, 6 boosters, it's extremely difficult to break out of that thought process, because if you've taken that many and then you realize that they're extremely dangerous, you're gonna freak out, have massive anxiety. They don't want that to be reality. And so I think they're just going to continue to go along. They're going to continue to think that it's safe. And so I think the only way for the people still taking boosters to stop is if the mainstream agencies and the authorities that they listen to so deeply, they need to come out and say they're not safe. I think that's the only way.
Yeah, I definitely think, still working in the hospital system, that we continue to see quite a few individuals that are getting their 6th, 7th. I've seen as high as 9. And unfortunately, the group that I work with and have worked with for a long time in the cardiac realm has been really the key individuals that have been the most affected. During the pandemic, when I worked on the cardiac transplant unit, we gave vaccines all the time, because in order to be considered for a transplant, you had to be 100% vaccinated. And then when the COVID-19 vaccine came out, that was no different. And the problem was that we had zero informed consent. Nobody knew what was going on with these vaccines. And these poor patients were really put between a rock and a hard place, because it's either you stay on the transplant list and get vaccinated, or you don't. And so I think I started in this journey post-pandemic in the occupation that I'm in right now, with seeing a lot of these individuals that are severely immunocompromised being told to continue to get these boosters. We're talking transplant individuals, much elderly, 70s and 80s. And so they just really trust their doctors are protecting them when they're being told, if you don't get these, you're going to be at risk to die from COVID. And what is really telling is that we continue to see these individuals coming into the hospital with multiple health issues. We always talk about getting these vaccines and dropping dead or dying suddenly, but what's happening is it's almost like a slow death. These individuals are coming in with multiple bouts of arrhythmias, blood clotting issues, strokes. We've had high infection with sepsis, neurological issues, and no one is wanting to have those conversations to link it. And it's just this causation and correlation of like, the more that they have, the higher instances of readmissions to the hospital and or complications they've had in their health. So, like Nick said, I think it has to come from these higher agencies, or unfortunately what we see is these individuals having these debilitating outcomes, and then somebody bringing up the conversation like, this probably was related to your 9th booster. But again, we have to have these conversations and not feel scared to have them. So that's just my opinion.
Yeah, I actually had this conversation today with a consult, and, moved a couple years ago to be closer to family. When they moved here, their health went down the toilet. And we were talking. She is not following me on social or anything like that. We met through an unconventional manner, and she didn't know my status or anything about that history, but she brought up the issue, and she's like, my pulmonologist, she has end-stage COPD. My pulmonologist is really wanting me to get another booster. And, I had some reactions. I didn't do well with it. I also got, a couple other vaccines, and it was really difficult. What do you think that I should do? And it's a unique relationship. And I said, I just need you to know that I have a bias. This is the world that I live in, and this is what I do. And told her about my state nonprofit and that sort of thing. But we started talking, and I said, I'm not going to tell you what to do. I think you just need to be informed. And I said, and we had already talked about risk benefit analysis in the conversation. And I said, so sitting down and going through that risk benefit analysis is going to be really important. But as we talked, what was really astounding to me is this client had no idea how these mRNA vaccines worked, and that her body was producing the spike protein, which was what was causing all these issues. And so I went through and I talked about long COVID versus COVID vaccine injury. She had no idea there were people injured, and it was astounding. She lives in a completely different world, apparently, than we do. And I mean, our proximity is very close. We live in the same area, and yet totally different outlook. And so it is having these conversations, it's bringing it up, it's being brave and discussing it from a fact-based standpoint and encouraging other medical professionals to do the same. We did a show on Alexis Lorenz and the nurse's ethical duty to stand between the patient and the grave. And I think it comes down to medical professionals standing up and speaking truth in a loving and compassionate way. So that way, and this person has a lot of anxiety, they're end stage COPD. If COVID is going to affect somebody adversely, it's probably this individual. And so that needs to be taken into account. But if they're also telling you about all these side effects, the conversations need to be had, and it takes some bravery, and it's walking that fine line between keeping your job and telling the truth.
I'll tell the truth every time.
I know you will.
And I can't understand, because these boosters have already proven to have negative efficacy. So I can't understand why it's complete insanity. I just can't understand how anybody, I've said this from the very beginning, it's really frightening, are these doctors complicit in the lie, or do they not know any better when they should? And which one of those scenarios is more frightening to you? Do they just not know any better, or are they just complicit and totally corrupt? But I want just to kind of pivot back to the self-amplication mRNA. I want to say self-replication, but self-amplication mRNA vaccines, it's a mouthful. But can you speak to Nick to the overstimulation of the immune system, and how can risks like that be mitigated?
So the overstimulation of the immune system by replicon injections, I'm not sure if you could mitigate it, to be completely honest. I mean, it's just a novel technology. Maybe down the road. I mean, the problem is if you try and clear out the spike protein from self-replicating shots, your body's just going to keep producing more. So I think we definitely should start to investigate solutions for those that will be injured by these shots, because it seems like they're going to try and roll them out for not just COVID, because they already developed it for Marburg virus and bird flu. So they have them down on the pipeline. They have them already created, and I think they wish to bring these new platforms forth for the next pandemics that they likely want to release.
And do you think that they are going to be really transparent when they say, hey, are they just going to say, hey, well, this is the new COVID shot, this is the next booster? Do you think they're actually going to start talking about, well, this is the self-amplifying mRNA vaccines, or are they just going to say, this is your COVID shot that you're due for, and then that's it? Because I don't feel like they're going to be saying anything more than that.
Well, I think they might say, oh, look, the self-amplifying vaccines came out. They're new and improved. They're better. You only have to get one every 2 years. They'll try and sell it to people that don't know any better. But the general population will just think, oh, it's just my annual COVID booster. So I think they'll try and pitch it as an upgrade. But I think most people will just think it's the same thing.
And the biggest problem with the COVID vaccine, I had more people getting their vaccines and getting their boosters and then complaining that they're the sickest they've been in their entire life. I saw, just in the very beginning, I can remember when the vaccines first rolled out, and I would have all of these phone calls on the triage line with people who I have never seen so many adult cases of appendicitis and strep throat. And I mean, RSV, when did we ever see RSV in adults, right? We've never. I mean, I've been in healthcare almost 30 years and I've never seen an RSV in adults. So it's really like we're destroying immune systems. Would you say that that's what kind of where we're at? And do you think that's going to get worse when we introduce this self-amplifying technology that's going to just replicate and continue to destroy immune systems?
I agree. I think the immune systems of the populations all across the world who have had high mRNA vaccine uptake have been severely diminished because, I mean, it really does just destroy your immune system, these shots. And we're seeing so many new issues pop up since the injections rolled out, such as elevated myocarditis, sudden cardiac death, and strokes, blood clotting, and cancers. Because the vaccines have been shown to increase cancer risk and let cancers that have been at bay for so long, say you're in remission and then you get this shot and then it just explodes. So yeah, these things destroy your immune system. And I think the self-replicating versions it's just going to be the previous ones, but on steroids.
Right. That's how I feel about it as well. And I just can't. Now, I will say, as I mentioned earlier, I didn't come into this fight anti-vax at all. I'm leaving that way. I'm absolutely leaving that way. I don't know what your position is on other vaccines. I'd be curious. Do you believe that any of the vaccines are safe, effective, or necessary?
Yeah, so that's where it gets tricky. Obviously vaccines, some of them have, and I guess this is even arguable now, have eradicated some diseases, such as
But have they, or was it clean water systems? Because
right.
I think we all realize that it really wasn't there's not any evidence that links mortality of any disease to a vaccine. It's clean water systems that were introduced, and that's I believe it's been taught in medical schools for however. I feel like doctors know, and they just I don't know, they just toe the vaccine line. But is there evidence, or can you point to evidence that links to mortality or to vaccines decreasing mortality?
Yeah, so in that case, no, I believe absolutely not. I think that none of the vaccines are decreasing any mortality. You're just injecting a bunch of toxins that don't belong in the body, especially for like a newborn baby, 6-month-old baby. You start giving them just toxic doses of these injections. They just don't need. But I mean, definitely, I think that a baby will be healthier, much healthier, if they receive none than any at all. But I guess you could say, yeah, there might be an increased risk of contracting something. But is it worth?
They're treatable though, right? Like, so if they were to get measles or I mean, those things are treatable.
Right. And you're correct on that. Exactly.
And when you get the actual disease, then you have protections, and then you have protections. What is it? Cancer protections and protection against all kinds of different things when you have natural immunity. So I'm a big fan of natural immunity these days. But they're coming at babies on day one of life, and they are injecting them with toxins with amounts of is it aluminum? Somebody help me. It's aluminum, right? Yeah. I can't think, but it's like 10 or 15 times higher than the recommended dose, something like that. So, I mean, it's absolutely absurd. And the babies are not coming out IV drug users or sex workers. So I don't understand why we are vaccinating on day one of life against Hep B. Somebody make it make sense.
I mean, it's also the same thing to say for the adults. I mean, a lot of our listeners and just the general public don't even know that there's an adult vaccine schedule. I mean, we always talk about children and what they're expected to get at certain ages, but there is something called an adult vaccine schedule. And I have had patients come in with heart issues when just a week or two prior, they had, wait for it, their shingles vaccine, their RSV vaccine, their flu vaccine, their pneumonia vaccine, and their COVID-19 vaccine. I mean, we're talking, they loaded these elderly patients up. They told them that they were at risk, that their immune systems could not fight any of this stuff off. And here they are coming to the hospital with other health issues and continuing to decline and have a hospital stay because now you can't fight anything off and you're shedding all over the place. And, you know, it even says on these inserts, especially for like the varicella, chickenpox, you know, you shed up to so many weeks. You should not be around certain individuals because you are high risk to potentially share and swap and all this other stuff. What comes from you receiving these vaccines. And we don't give the informed consent like we're supposed to. A lot of individuals have no clue about any of this stuff. So it's definitely unfortunate and needs to be kind of discussed more with the adults in general.
Absolutely. It's complete insanity, as we discussed many, many times on this show. All right. Well, we are coming up on a break. America Out Loud Talk Radio plays on the iHeartRadio network. You can also listen on our media player from any web browser, anywhere in the world. We have the best in-class apps available on Apple, Android, or Alexa, 24/7, Great Talk Radio. All of our shows go to podcast the following day. You can hear them on apps such as Spotify, Stitcher, Pandora, iHeart Podcasts, and many more. Be sure to subscribe and rate the show on Apple Podcasts for me. Don't forget to check out our online store at americaoutloud.shop, where you can find all of the products that we represent on our network at a discounted rate, including an incredible line of products from Chemical Free Body. Please show them your support. I'll catch you on the other side of this break. Stay with us.
Is your gut a mess? 2/3 of Americans suffer because of gastrointestinal issues, and I was one of them. That is why we created a 3-step, doctor-formulated, completely natural gut reboot system that you can do at home in just minutes a day. Go to chemicalfreebody.com/outloud today. Get the Malcolm Healthy Gut Bundle, reboot your gut and your energy, and save 20% on your first order.
I'm so confused. I don't know what to do.
I'm afraid of going to the hospital.
My doctor tells me nutrition doesn't work.
Trust is earned. We are the Energetic Health Institute, and we want to earn your trust. Natural medicine, holistic nutrition, detoxification, fasting, cellular healing, and so much more. Remember, the best way to be free is to be healthy. So stop being a patient and start being a student at energetichealthinstitute.org.
During COVID, we got educated on the power of natural virus protection and immune boosting using vitamins A, C, D, zinc, and quercetin. The problem? Getting them at the right dosage from truly natural sources that doesn't cost an arm and a leg. Enter the Daily V-Stack. Using breakthrough cellular absorption technology, we put those vitamins together and supercharge them with a complete multi-mineral complex. The Daily V-Stack is basically an oral IV of 6 products, all in one at an affordable price. Go to chemicalfreebody.com/outloud today. Get the Daily V-Stack, protect yourself, boost your immune system, and save 20% on your first order.
Stay prepared with the Wellness Company's Medical Emergency Kit, designed by top cardiologist Dr. Peter McCullough. It includes medications like ivermectin, amoxicillin, generic Z-Pak, and other life-saving antibiotics, plus a guidebook for safe use. Be ready for emergencies. Order now at twc.health/outloud and use code OUTLOUD for $60 off your first order plus free shipping.
Welcome back to Nurses Out Loud on America Out Loud Talk Radio. I'm your host, Nurse Kimberly Overton. Wherever you're listening from today and whatever you're doing, I thank you for giving me the gift of your time. Be sure to make AmericaOutloud.news your daily stop for all the latest news and happenings. We all must do our part and share the stories, the articles, the podcasts, and videos so we can help secure America's future. let's jump right back in. If you're just joining us, I've been talking with Nicolas Hulscher, nurse Anthony, Lord help me, nurse Ashley Grogg, she's going to kill me, and nurse Nicole. Thank you guys for being here with me. I know, I'm telling you, it's late. I had a long day at work today. Give me a break.
I appreciate the humor. I'm over here laughing.
Lord, I'm telling you. So before we went to break, we had some great conversations. We've talked about the self-amplifying mRNA technology that's coming down the pike. Let's talk a little bit about what do we see coming next. We are in an election year. It's October. So we have the October surprise, whatever that's going to be. And, with the election coming up, typically every 4 years, we see a new pandemic or a new virus of some kind that will come out. The bird flu seems to be getting a lot of attention. What do you guys think about that?
So interestingly, this summer I spent a lot of time hauling manure and being a full-time farmer for my dad. And at that time is when all of this bird flu stuff started really shaking up, and it was spread through cow feces, this, that, and the other. One of my members had alerted me to a meeting that was happening across the nation with local health officials, as well as state representatives, state senators, and the Council on Foreign Relations, interestingly. And this was their topic. And they were talking about preparedness and readiness. And Rick Bright, and I jokingly but seriously say he will be the Anthony Fauci of bird flu if it does happen. He was talking about how they have stockpile of egg-based vaccines. They were working on mRNA vaccines. And so to hear Nick say that they have been working on the replicon or self-replicating, self-amplifying vaccines for bird flu is terrifying. And during that time, after I went to that meeting, I started doing some digging and found a video from 2019. It was put on by I think it was the Milken Institute. And Fauci and this Rick Bright guy, who was part of BARDA, or the head of BARDA, the former Obama FDA, head of the FDA, someone from the flu, like some flu philanthropy group, and then somebody from the Sabin Institute. And they were all talking about making the flu sexy again. And that's their whole video, is making flu sexy again, and talking about needing an entity to infuse the flu, to make it popular, to get funding into it. And so, you see COVID happen, and then we're talking about this bird flu. Rick Bright is working with the Council on Foreign Relations and hosting these meetings, preparing, and basically telling our officials that they should be prepared for lockdowns, figure out what they're going to do with the bird flu, with the schools, and how it was different from COVID because the flu hits, the children. And so that was a big thing. So it's really interesting to hear this and put it in light of that universal flu vaccine, make flu sexy again conversation, to hear Nick talk about self-amplifying. So do you, Nick, think that this is going towards those? And one thing they talk about is patch vaccines in that video. They talk about being able to create a patch vaccine that they can apply to the skin. And this is their ultimate goal for this universal vaccine that can be created very quickly. If you leave on a plane from somewhere, by the time you touch down, you could have a vaccine waiting for you. Do you think that's what this is, to push into those particle-mediated DNA vaccines?
Yes, I think that they would love to roll out. I know they have these dissolvable patch vaccines with micro needles. I know the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation actually funded this platform. But yeah, I do believe they would love to roll that out because it's so easy. You just ship them. You could ship them to people and they'll just put them on. They don't have to have any pain. They don't have to go to the doctor. They can just ship them to your house and they'll get high vaccine uptake. But so I think that's where they would love to go. But regarding bird flu, so the McCullough Foundation, John Leake and I, we went to the International Bird Flu Summit last weekend in Washington, D.C. And what we observed was there's a company called Ginkgo Biosecurity that was the sponsor of this. and they work with the intelligence agencies and all that. And so they're sponsoring this summit, and they look for biological threats. They see if viruses are either lab made or natural. And so we just thought it was kind of interesting that they're the top funder of this summit. But we also saw that there's going to be a full-scale bird flu exercise in New York City on October 20th or 21st. And so I think they're definitely trying to revamp bird flu, because I know it was all over the news back in April, May, June. It kind of died off, and now they're trying to bring it back. But the most concerning thing that I think we should be worried about is gain of function research with influenza viruses, because they've been doing it since 2010. Ron Fouché and Kawaoka at the University of Wisconsin. They've just been playing around with bird flu viruses for decades, making it able to transmit between ferrets, which have human-like respiratory tract. And so they've been trying to make this thing infectious for humans for so long. And they even had a few lab accidents, like 3 of them, I believe. And it even prompted the Obama administration to put a moratorium on this research like about a decade ago. And that was lifted, I think, in 2017 or something. But so this is, they've been playing around with these for so long. And so we should, I think the best thing we can do to prevent a bird flu pandemic would be to shut down all gain of function research immediately.
Well, that was what was crazy, listening to Rick Bright, and there was a woman by the name of Jennifer Nuzzo who was in on this meeting, and they talked about how this is a wild card, and Rick Bright had been studying this for the past 20 years, and like I said, the Anthony Fauci of COVID, right, or bird flu. And it was really interesting because they had a whole map and they showed its transmission to mammals, and were really playing this up and how it was transmitting through cows, and how it is, I cannot remember for the life of me the words that they used, but a shapeshifter. They called it point blank a shapeshifter. So right now, it's only presenting as an eye infection, blah, 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 blah. But that's not to say that it's not going to become a serious respiratory threat. And so it was just absolutely wild. And naively, I guess I didn't even think about gain of function with bird flu. How did I miss that?
Yeah, it gets them excited. These pandemics, they really get so excited about it. They're going to make so much money. They get to control people. It's exactly what they dream about.
Do we think this is, in your opinion, do you think it's a population control?
Yes, I think they would love to control the population as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Bill Gates in 2010 or something, TED Talks said he wants to reduce the population through vaccines. So I think they would love to not only control the population, but I feel like they feel the need to do that by reducing the population.
Yeah, absolutely. And the man has said it. He's on video saying it. He said it, and he said it for decades. And I don't understand them. Like, no, he doesn't want to do that. He's literally telling you what he wants to do, and people just continue to roll their sleeve up. And I don't understand it.
Right. Why?
Somebody injured.
I was going to say, I wonder too if this is kind of related to where the vaccine injured continue to try to speak out and try to raise awareness for the severity of their illnesses and their injuries, and how no one is coming to the plate to try and study them and test them. Is this the plan? Is this part of it so that they don't? It's one of those things where now you're going to be pushing out another vaccine that has all of this replication, and it's going to be 10 times worse than the original, C-19 vaccines. And you have an overwhelming amount of individuals that are going to, dare I say, burden the healthcare system that's already broken into shams. And now you're going to inject more people, and there's going to be more poor outcomes, but there's no testing to show what's going on with these people and how to get them better. And then they just become a product of the system and continue to decline in poor health until eventually it does take their life, because they've had so many bad things happen and they can't stop replicating the spike.
Yeah,
right. It's
their big question. Why is nobody testing us? But it's because who's going to fund these tests?
And I think that's such a horrible and disheartening thing to hear. And I wish I had the money. Like, we all just need to be really good at, becoming independently wealthy, right? Because if we could fund these things, how quickly would those labs be shut down, though? Like, you look at Dr. Cole, a pathologist who's able to do these things, and he no longer has his lab. I think that goes back. Is this part of the design? And I think that's where we have to lean in and push deep. And, McCullough Foundation, Nurses Out Loud, we each of us nurses have our own area that we're pushing on through state work or whatever. But it's just continuing to have these conversations and to push back and to force the acknowledgement of the injured, and that's what's frustrating. Is why can you not just admit what happened and try to help them? That's all I think any of us want. Acknowledge an issue and try to help them.
There's so many people that still to this day have to travel across county lines, state lines, to find a physician that's willing to acknowledge first that a vaccine injured individual even exists. They don't want to put it in writing because they're so afraid of what's going to happen to their license. And then even if you get someone to acknowledge that they're vaccine injured, you then have to find someone who understands what's going on, because most testing has not been done on these individuals, and it's kind of a shot in the dark to figure out how to treat and help these individuals. And unfortunately, because so many of the severe ones continue to produce this spike and haven't found anything to stop that replication, which then, further makes their health decline because they're constantly in these cytokine storms. There's really a lot of loss in the vaccine injured community. And it's really sad that eventually there's turns out to be a high amount that end up taking their life because of the pain and the lack of acknowledgement and the lack of help. And so it's definitely something on the forefront that I think rolling out these other vaccines that could replicate even more and never stop potentially could just open Pandora's box in such a way that could just be absolutely catastrophic.
Yeah. And Nick, could you speak to, as far as the shedding? Obviously, the shedding with the traditional COVID vaccines is a concern. Do you feel like that's going to be like the shedding on steroids? Are we going to, what can we do as unvaccinated individuals to protect ourselves from the potential of shedding of a self-amplicating?
I think the best protection from shedding from a self-amplification mRNA would probably be to you would have to avoid people that have gotten that injection.
That's super hard for a nurse. I'll just say, very hard.
Yeah. So I think the best protection from that would be to push extremely hard for everybody and for nobody to accept approval of these products in the United States. We just can't accept it. It would be a catastrophic disaster, and we just can't let it happen.
I keep telling people, power is with the people, but nobody will stand up. I mean, we've been us and on, this level and so many more in the medical freedom community that have been screaming this from the rooftops for 3 years. We have testified in front of legislative bodies and nobody is listening. I'm appalled that these products haven't been pulled off the market, but we've been screaming this for almost 4 years and nothing's happening.
I got one more question about this self-replicating, whatever, self-amplifying, whatever you want to call it.
Good. She can't say it either.
There's 3 names: replicon, self-replicating, and self-amplifying.
I don't feel so bad.
Replicon sounds the scariest.
Replicon.
Yeah. Sounds like one of those Transformers or something.
Yes. But at this point, we don't know. So honestly, I used ChatGPT to ask it some questions about self-replicating to kind of just see what it would spit out. And it talked about there are ways that supposedly these can be programmed to be self-limiting. Now, the way that we've seen the mRNA stuff turn out, the standard mRNA turn out, I don't know that that's necessarily a reality. My real question, and I don't think there's an answer to this, but I'm going to ask it anyways. What are the chances that this could be the self-replicating mRNA could be, I would think, okay, yes, maybe through intimate contact, but like saliva, aerosolization, at what point do we have to worry about that? And that, I think, is where the fear comes as a nurse, because patients are constantly like coughing in your face and, all sorts of gross things. So do you have any thoughts on that, Nick?
I think it would need to be extremely thoroughly tested to see exactly where it excretes. Can it transmit to another animal, another human? They have to do all of these tests. They have to look and see what it does. But right now they're not doing absolutely anything to see if it does. So I guess I would have to say we just don't know. We don't know if this will be able to transmit. But from what we've learned from the conventional mRNA ones, we would have to assume that it probably would. But again, we just can't let these get through. I think the FDA, the CDC, they need a complete restructuring, and hopefully that can be brought about. Hopefully we can finally address the regulatory capture and prevent this from happening in the first place.
Yeah, and that's why it's such a big part of what I do with Remnant Healthcare, and what I keep preaching is like just completely breaking away from this broken system. Like we don't want to play anymore. We're not doing it, and we have stepped outside for the most part of mainstream medicine. Like I don't want to go to a doctor. I wouldn't even I've had all my vaccines up until COVID. I wouldn't even let them give me a TB skin test when I started my new job. I would not even let them give me a TB skin test. And that's where I'm at. I don't want to participate in the traditional medical industrial complex any longer. And I think more people need to find a way to change their mindset away from the sick care model and start looking at preventative health. The further you stay away from a doctor, the healthier you are. There's just no denying that. It's just true. And I mean, I have all the respect in the world for physicians, the good ones. But that doesn't change the fact that if you stay away from doctors, you're healthier.
I think too, constantly told that it's not okay to be sick. Like genuinely, it's like terrifying. Like the fact that you would even think about being sick is like, why would you do that? Why would you go there? Think of all the things that could happen. And like we were talking about the childhood vaccines, it's like, yeah, all of those things can be treatable. And when you look and you research online, you will see that the likelihood of death from any of these things is so minuscule. And again, having to look at the patient and their comorbidities is completely negated when people bring up, the conversation of, oh, well, you're just being, destructive and you're not thinking about anybody else but yourself, and you should vaccinate to protect others. And essentially, it's just like, it's okay to be sick. It's okay to have your body go through that natural immunity. And why don't we ever teach individuals more of the preventative care? I mean, if you were on stage at the White House and you were having these conversations, with, the health administrators and everything, and you gave both sides of the coin, I think it would be a little different. But we don't ever hear that other side. It's all or nothing. You only hear in the hospital, when the last time you got your vaccine, have you been vaccinated? It's not anything else on top of that, when they come in. And it's just really unfortunate because most people, like I said, hold on to everything that their physicians say. And it's very rare that they'll say, maybe try, a low salt, low fat diet, watch your fluid, etc. But you're not doing anything else but pushing these vaccines and then having a repeat customer. We're just scaring the population into thinking that any type of illness is just going to take you out. And in reality, it's if you keep injecting yourself with toxins and poisons, if you keep wearing a piece of cloth over your face and, trying to do all of these things that have proven not to work, you're still getting sick. These people are still coming in with COVID. It's like, what are we doing? Like, it's just madness. It's just madness.
It's a vaccine religion.
That is
like a cult. I'll call it a cult. It really and truly is. And, talking about, and here's the thing about get your vaccine so you can protect, those who can't get, you remember that conversation? That's the line they have used for so many years. You've got to get your flu shot because these people who are immune compromised can't get it. But now all of a sudden we can vaccinate everybody, including do you remember, was it baby August? Do you guys remember that little 6-month-old baby? They were denying this baby here in Tennessee. They were denying this baby a heart transplant. And they were not going to go forward with it unless he caught up on all his vaccinations, including the COVID vaccine, including the flu shot, including the MMR, all of them. This child had never received a vaccine. This child was so severely immune compromised, he doesn't have a spleen. Like, since when do we do that? Since when do we vaccinate the already immune compromised?
We did a show was that Friday, on the Alexis Lorenz case. And again, that nurse's duty to stand between the patient. And it's like, let's critical think for a second. Mm-hmm. You're going to vaccinate this kid, and then how quickly are you going to turn around? He has that surgery within a couple weeks, God willing. He's not going to have developed any of those antibodies. His immune system isn't working. He doesn't have a spleen. We're taking all the risks for none of the benefits.
Yeah.
There's plenty of vaccines too that in the insert, if you look, it will tell you they have never, ever trialed it on immunocompromised patients. It'll tell you right in the insert. And it's absolutely mind-blowing that we're playing Russian roulette, especially with these women who are trying to get pregnant. I had a friend who was trying to get pregnant. It's been awful for her. And she went to go see a specialist, and he was like, you need to get X, Y, and Z vaccines, chickenpox, COVID, all of these things he was trying to get, and then turn it around and said, listen, if you don't, you could potentially contract this. And then if you do get pregnant, it could kill the baby. And how would that make you feel that you were not protected? It's like
fear-mongering.
Yeah, fear-mongering. It's absolutely ridiculous. But even again, in the inserts, it will not tell you that they've trialed this on pregnant women. And it's like, why are you pushing this when you can't say that it's safe and effective? It's never been tested.
Yeah. I can't believe we are actually out of time. I can't believe it. It always goes by so quickly. Nick, thank you so much for joining, for providing your insight on this really hot topic. I feel like we're going to be talking a lot more about this as the days and months ahead. So thank you so much for sharing your insight. And of course, thank you, Ashley Grogg, not Anthony, and Nurse Nicole. Thank you for joining me today, ladies. I appreciate you guys.
Thank you.
And that is all the time that we have for today, friends. But remember, we are here on the air 5 days a week, Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern, with a different nurse host daily. You can also catch the encore at 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Please be sure to tune in and listen to myself and my amazing sister nurses. As we walk you through all of these hot topics, we will empower you with information and education. We will advocate and we will stand in the gap for you, because we are nurses and this is what we do. I'm your host, Nurse Kimberly Overton. You can find me here every Wednesday morning at 10 a.m. Eastern. Until next time, be safe, be well, and God bless. Remember, we are in a war for truth. We are putting out a bounty on the real misinformation and exposing the purveyors of propaganda. No topic is off limits as we shine our lights and expose the darkness.
It's time